Welcome to the podcast on North American literature, hosted by the Research Group Studies in American Literature and Culture from the University of Granada. I'm Robin, and today we'll be interviewing Lola, a student in North American Literature 2 at the University of Granada. I took North American Literature 1 last semester, but this semester I couldn't, so it's really nice to be a part of this right now. Thanks so much for coming on the show today, Lola.
Hi, Robin. Also, hi, listeners. Hi, everyone, really. I'm so excited to be here right now and to have this platform to share my findings, because I just worked so hard on this essay and it has become really special to me, so it's such a pleasure to be here and talk about it.
Amazing. So tell me, you've been working on an assignment recently. Is it the same as the one that we took in North American Literature 1 last semester?
The one that I didn't do?
Yes, that's the one I'm referring to, the one that you didn't do.
Yeah, exactly. So for those of you who have not been listening to any other episodes in this podcast, which I encourage you to do, because I think it's always cool to gain some insights into North American literature, and you can listen to this as background noise while you're doing house chores or something, but it's really cool, and my classmates also worked so hard, so yeah, you should definitely give them a listen. But yeah, going back to the question, the assignment consisted on picking one of the works in the syllabus for this course, which covers from realism, which happens by the end of the 19th century, and then it goes through modernism, postmodernism, and post-postmodernism. The name is so original, right? Which is the present. And we also had to pick one written, of course, from the North American literature canon as well, written before realism, and then we had to prove influence between them, which is tricky, but it's also really cool. And we had to be original as well, because if not, it's just plagiarism. And also maybe to make the teacher have fun, because imagine having to grade like 100 essays on the same topic. Like, that would be just so boring, right? And as the title of this video may have already suggested, my choices were Moby by Herman Melville and Lady Lazarus by Sylvia Plath. Like, anyone who knows me just a little bit will know that I'm obsessed with her. So it was really great to work on an author that I just love so much. So yeah.
And you had to use ChatGPT again, am I right?
Yep. Unfortunately, we had to use the bot. I forgot to mention it, and it was one of the most important things of the task. And since I had experience working with it for the previous essay, and also with this one, because I like to test it first, I kind of knew that it was going to be superficial and redundant, and that I was not going to like its response to my suggestions. So I decided to make it work on the contextual framing part, which included the historical, cultural, and aesthetic context of each of the authors, because I figured that that was the part that required the least critical thinking, because of course it requires critical thinking, because you have to select information and put it together under a word limit, but in comparison to the analysis, for instance, I opted for the contextual framing. And after testing it out and losing a lot of my patience on the way, I provided the bot with a set of instructions. I think I gave it a word limit of 600 to 800 words maybe, because that would give me room to expand it, because I already knew it was going to be superficial. And I also made very clear the fact that I didn't want any kind of judgment or opinion from the bot, because it tends to do that a lot, like saying things like furious energy or something like that that's not academic and you cannot really prove it. And I didn't want that in my essay. And I also, of course, restricted the use of sources to only academic ones, which the bot did not respect. Cited Wikipedia and things like that. And I'm like, I told you to only use academic sources. So the instructions were basically those, and I wanted it to make each sentence a paraphrase of a sentence of an academic text, so that it would be some sort of like collage, and then I could give unity to it. But at the same time, I would kind of be in control of the sources and everything, but the bot made them up, so it was no use.
Okay, that is a way better technique than I used last semester for the same assignment, because I used ChatGPT for the critical thinking, and my god, that bot really does not know anything, and he really can't think critically. And I was battling so hard with him giving me wrong facts and wrong information, and I think it took double, if not triple, the amount of time it would have taken me to just write the essay completely on my own. But would you say that you enjoyed or found it fulfilling to work with ChatGPT?
Absolutely not.
I just like
It was just very hard for me, and I struggled a lot because I'm a perfectionist. So I was looking for the perfect answer, the most reliable one. I was given it very detailed instructions, as I've mentioned before, and I also wanted to do myself the things because I've suffered doing this essay, but I've also enjoyed it, and I would have liked to do it just on my own. And as you've said, it took me like triple the time and effort, maybe more than triple. But if it was fulfilling in any sense, it would be because I managed to make something decent out of a very not decent answer, and because it helped me go out of my comfort zone a little bit. And still, that was not the most frustrating part of the essay. It was definitely the appendix for me.
Yeah, I will definitely agree with you there. That part was absolutely horrific and very grueling.
Yeah, it's just so hard to put images in Word for no reason. And yeah, I struggled so much, but it's done now. So yeah, let's get into the interesting part.
Yeah, no, I found the assignment in total really, really difficult for the ChatGPT and for the appendix. But let's talk a little bit about the essay and the end result. Do you want to talk me through, I guess, your thesis and what your research found for you? Was your thesis confirmed? Did you manage to find connections and a tangible link between the two texts?
Well, you really gathered everything into a single question. But I think I'm just going to start by introducing the texts, just in case anyone may be unfamiliar with them, because I know that not all of our listeners are philologists wannabe. So yeah, so Moby Dick is an 1861, yeah, I think it's 1861 novel, written by Herman Melville, and it follows Ishmael's journey in the Peakwood. So we don't really know much about Ishmael, but the novel starts with him saying that when he feels suicidal, he goes to the sea. So he embarks on the Peakwood, which is a whaling ship, and it happens to be commanded by this super crazy Captain Ahab, and his main obsession is seeking revenge against Moby Dick, which is this legendary white sperm whale that has these godlike qualities and everything. And Ahab wants revenge because Moby Dick ripped his leg off some years ago. So we follow this journey and the crew of the ship, and it mixes a lot of genres. But what caught my attention the most from the novel is its philosophical reflections. Just from the first chapter, you get so much meaning and so much symbolism that you end up feeling like, what the hell is water? If you got the reference, put it in the comments. It's really cool. I'm just fascinated by those sort of things. But yeah, it was composed during a period which is known as the American Renaissance, in which American authors sought to define an American literary tradition in order for the nation to have this national identity. Also, Romanticism was happening in Europe at the beginning of the century, and those aesthetics crossed the ocean like Moby Dick and reached America, so they also reached Moby Dick, the novel. But yeah, so basically I was fascinated by those reflections and that symbolism and how the novel was written, and I enjoyed the lectures we had last semester on it a lot. So I wanted to read the novel when I finished my exam, so that's what I was doing. But I was thinking about Plath a lot because we had the lecture on Plath that semester and I was so excited by it. And also it happened to be on my birthday at first, but then the teacher changed the schedule. But I forgive her because I got Lolita, which is very cool as well. But yeah, so I was so excited and I decided to go and read Lady Lazarus again. And I was reading it while I was reading Moby Dick at the time. And I just saw Moby Dick in it. And at first it was in different features than those that I analyzed, but which I'm gonna gatekeep. Sorry. But then, well, I think I need to introduce Lady Lazarus first. It's such a mess. Sorry. So, Lady Lazarus was written in October 1962, right in the middle of postmodernism, but it also happened to be shortly before Plath's suicide, and people often reduce the poem and her work in general to being about her suicide, which I find so unfair. It's like they're treating her as a beautiful dead woman that Poe talked about, and I think her work is so much more than that. And also it's fiction, it's not about her as an author, so I just wanted to make that clear. But yeah, it was recorded for the BBC and it was published posthumously in 1965 in the Ariel poem collection, which I encourage you to read because it's very good. Also everything by Plath, really. And she said the following about the poem speaker, so I quote her now. The poem speaker is a woman who has the terrible gift of being reborn. The only problem is that she has to die first. She is a phoenix, the libertarian spirit, what you will. She is also just a good, plain, very resourceful woman. And I mean, only by hearing this, you cannot really know the poem. So I encourage you now, to all of you listening, if you don't know the poem or if you haven't read it or anything, to just pause this and go and read the poem because it's not very long. Or you could also search for the recording, which is available in YouTube. You just put like Lady Lazarus read by Sylvia Plath or something like that and it will instantly pop up. Because it's such a cool thing that we have that available. We can listen to it in her own voice. And also she said that those poems written in 1962 were meant to be performed, read out loud. So I encourage you now to go and pause this, search for the poem, read it, and then come back, because it's going to be way easier to follow the podcast and everything. And you're going to also have the experience of having listened to Sylvia Plath, which is great. Because we initially wanted to include it in here and like put the recording right away, but we thought also about the copyright issues. By the way, Melville didn't have a proper copyright law protecting him. Fun fact that you can say in a party or something if you want to get called a nerd or something, I don't know. But yeah, we cannot do that because of copyright, so you have to look for it yourselves. So yeah, just pause this here and be back in like 5 minutes, and I'm gonna go on.
So tell me, Lola, what connections did you find between the two texts?
So as I've said before, I initially saw different things that I'm gonna gatekeep. Sorry again. But one of the first things I did was to go to Plath's journals, because I'm a bad person. I read dead people's journals. But also I'm an almost philologist and I'm very morbid. I admit it. And the fact that I have that available is just so cool to me. It may not be the most ethical thing to do, but yeah, I looked for Moby Dick in the journals and I found 3 mentions of the novel, but I'm particularly interested in one, which I'm gonna read right now. I am rereading Moby Dick in preparation for the exam deluge tomorrow. I'm whelmed and wondrous at the swimming biblical and craggy Shakespearean cadences, the rich and lustrous and fragrant recreation of spermaceti, ambergris, miracle, marvel, the sun-thunderous Leviathan. One of my few wishes to be, safe coward I am, aboard a whale ship through the process of turning a monster to light and heat.
Wow, so clearly Sylvia Plath had some major influence there. I mean, she's kind of directly told us that she was somewhat profoundly impacted by Moby Dick. That's awesome. That's a really good start, I would imagine, for your analysis.
Yeah, it was definitely a solid start for my essay. And as a fun fact, the entry was written in April, the 14th of April, 1959, and I started writing my essay on the 14th of April, 2025. And I did it on purpose completely so that I could mention this in the essay. Not the essay, the podcast, sorry. So yeah.
That's so cute. I love that.
Yeah. But there's actually more to it, because you may have noticed that the entry is from 1959 and the poem is from 3 years later than the entry. But I also searched for Lazarus in the journals, and I came across 2 interesting entries. So, a couple of months after the entry, on the 13th of June, which by the way is my sister's birthday, so happy birthday to her, even though it's not the 13th of June anymore, she got inspired from 2 mental health related articles on Cosmopolitan, and she wrote how there was an increasing market for mental hospital staff, and she deemed herself, and I quote her, a fool if she didn't relieve it, recreate it. And she expressed how she must write a story about, a college girl's suicide, which may ring a bell because Lady Lazarus features the suicide theme.
It is sounding a little bit familiar to me, I won't lie.
And you'll be like, but where is Lazarus then? So we go 2 days later, the 15th of June, and she suggested a title for the story she just talked about. And that title was, dramatic pause, Lazarus, My Love. Oh my god, we have the Lazarus there. I was so happy to find this. But yeah, and this was in a section entitled Notes, and she also wrote the following, and I quote her again. Lazarus theme, come back from the dead, kicking off thermometers, violent ward, and Lady Lazarus is pretty violent, so it fits. And what does this have to do with Melville? Well, the fact that Lazarus is mentioned in 2 different chapters, and she just happened to talk about biblical allusions, so there's something in there, right?
I guess this is always the question, right? I mean, as students and as researchers, it's a question of how much we can read into things and how much of our own interpretation or retelling of texts we can apply.
I mean, the Lazarus theme could have been borrowed from Melville, because for sure she recycled it 3 years later to write Lady Lazarus. But the only way to know that for sure would be if she happened to come back from the dead, like the speaker in Lady Lazarus. And to my understanding, that's not possible. So we cannot know that, but we can say that it's plausible. And this plausibility is also supported by the fact that both of the features that she eulogized in Moby Dick are present in Lady Lazarus.
It's so interesting. Like, I didn't realize that there were so many, I think overt references is maybe not the right way to put it, but I mean, I've never read Sylvia Plath's journals. I think that was a really interesting way to go about it, because you kind of do, I mean, of course, okay, ethical, maybe boundaries, I don't know, in the world of literature, I think that there are so many boundaries that as students we can't really think about so much. But I think it's really interesting that you kind of had that entry into her psyche and her headspace when approaching this essay.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, I may be a bad person, but it's just so cool to be able to access all of that. It's just so cool. She may have been lying and like she may have never read Moby Dick. I don't know. But we don't know. And like the cool thing about this is that you can kind of stretch it a little bit. So that's cool.
Okay, so I'd like to know a little bit more about some of the formal literary aspects and parallels that you found between the two. So, should we start with the swimming biblical cadences or with the craggy Shakespearean cadences?
Maybe we can start with the Shakespearean ones, because it's like the word Shakespearean in itself is interesting because it offers two readings. We could read it as dramatic devices in relation to theatricality, but we can also read it as Shakespearean traits, as in like Shakespeare's work. And like the reading of the word as dramatic devices comes because Shakespeare is so important. Like if I say English playwright, you're probably going to think about Shakespeare, so it's plausible. And we have both of them in the poem, so that's even cooler. But yeah, I found an article by Raymond G. Hughes, dated in 1932, so Sylvia may have read it. I'm not gonna say that she read it because we don't know, but she studied English, so yeah. And this guy was one of the first ones to study the connections between Melville and Shakespeare, because today we just take it for granted, like it's in the introduction of the Norton Anthology to Moby Dick, so yeah. But at the beginning of the century, nobody had studied it until these guys started to do so. And he comments on a set of features typical of Shakespeare in Moby Dick. And one of them is the repetition of words for an emphatic purpose. And he puts a very interesting example. And it's so, then, softly, softly. And if you've listened to the poem or if you've read it, you may be thinking of the so her doctor, so her enemy. So it's quite a coincidence that the word repeated for emphasis is the same. And it could have been just that coincidence, but Plath uses this device several times throughout the poem, such as in soon the flesh, they had to call and call, and beware, for instance. So that's definitely a Shakespearean cadence, right?
To me, it's sounding very plausible. I mean, everything you're reading out is really screaming. Even like the mention of the flesh, maybe that's just a strange connotation I have in my head from pound of flesh, but everything you're reading out is screaming Shakespeare to me. So
yeah, and also the flesh in Hamlet, yeah, totally. But yeah, the so in Moby Dick and the so in Plath. Suspicious. And now we can move on to probably my favorite part of the essay, which is the experimentation with the breaking of the fourth wall. This was routine in Shakespeare, but it's also a very theatrical device in general, as in the dramatic genre. And it's also a very postmodern thing. Also, postmodernism is very neo-Baroque, so again, that's a connection with Shakespeare again. And it was influenced by television. So yeah, Lady Lazarus reads like a dramatic monologue performed for a peanut crunching crowd who is expecting this big striptease. In other words, a sort of morbid unveiling of she who comes back to life every time she kills herself. And the speaker directly addresses the audience, but she does so to frustrate their aesthetic cravings. So she says, "Gentlemen, ladies, these are my hands, my knees. I may be skin and bone. Nevertheless, I am the same identical woman." So, where one would expect this Elizabethan-like blazon, and for those who are unfamiliar with the term, it's a tradition in which a lady was described like her eyes were blah 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 and her skin was blah blah blah.
Yeah, I don't know, some insane beauty. I was swimming in her eyes and her lips were like beautiful mountain peaks. I don't know what they're doing to women, but
like with very beautiful adjectives and things and metaphors with beautiful things. And here we have like just hands, just knees, just skin and bone. And she even plays with the grotesque as well. In my skin, bright as a Nazi lampshade, because she could have said bright as in like dapple with starlight, which is what Byron does in She Walks in Beauty, which is another blazon. But she goes like Nazi lampshade, so
maybe a very different move from Byron, I would say. Not dappled with starlight for sure.
Disruptive of the literary tradition. Is like she's appropriating it to herself, and she's also breaking the convention of the beautiful dead woman, because she's writing about this not necessarily beautiful dead woman as a woman. So that means that the poem is about suicide and she's the aesthetic object but also the one describing it. So that's really cool. You may be wondering, what does this have to do with Moby Dick? Hold on. So if she's in control of this big striptease, which she is because she's the one describing it and the one unveiling each feature, she is denying her audience and her readers / listeners, whatever, also what they expect to find in a confessional poem, which is her anguish, her emotions, whatever morbid things take place in the mind of a suicidal woman, and she's denying all of that. And Melville also offers a dismembered description of the whale, Moby Dick in particular, but he does so in like encyclopedic-like episodes, like these are the kinds of whales. Also there's a whole chapter on the tail, then another one on the spout hole, and in this particular chapter he's also denying the reader what lies behind the spout hole. And guess how? By breaking the fourth wall, as Lady Lazarus is doing. So it's just an interesting coincidence. And I'm gonna read the passage. It's not complete, like there's gaps in the middle, but just so you get an idea. "You have seen him spout. Then declare what the spout is. Can you not tell water from it? You might almost stand in it, and yet be undecided as to what it is precisely. And I know one who, coming into still closer contact with the spout, whether with some scientific object in view or otherwise, I cannot say, the skin peeled off from his cheek and arm. Another thing, I have heard it said, and I do not much doubt it, that if the jet is fairly spouted into your eyes, it will blind you. The wisest thing the investigator can do then it seems to me, is to let this spout alone. My hypothesis is this, that the spout is nothing but mist. It's such a cool passage, isn't it?
Definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And on top of denying the spout hole, he also keeps the whale's face veiled. And Ishmael says, "Dissect him how I may, then I but go skin deep. I know him not, and never will. But if I know not even the tail of this whale, how understand his head? Much more, how comprehend his face when face he has none? Thou shalt see my back parts, my tail, he seems to say, but my face shall not be seen. But I cannot completely make out his back parts, and hint what he will about his face. I say again, he has no face." So it's a fragmented description divided in several chapters, each describing a feature in an unconventional way, and yet the picture remains incomplete. So interesting.
Definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then we also have the fact that both aesthetic objects of both texts have divine or mythical qualities. For example, Lady Lazarus is this phoenix-like figure that can come back from the dead, which common humans cannot do. And then Moby Dick is very legendary. He's described as having ubiquity and immortality. For immortality is but ubiquity in time, says Ishmael. But he's also referred to as Leviathan, not only throughout the novel, but also in Plath's entry, and that's biblical allusion as well, isn't it?
Oh, okay, amazing. So now we're moving on to the swimming biblical cadences, right?
Yep, we're moving to biblical allusion, and maybe this is one of the first noticeable things in Lady Lazarus, because it's in the title. So yeah, we have the figure of Lazarus, but it's also subverted because right before that we have the word lady. So Plath is making Lazarus a lady, and if we read the poem as a dramatic monologue, isn't it also reminiscent of when in a play script you have the name of the character and then what the character has to say? It's sort of like that. I like to see it like that, and if we do see it like that, both the biblical allusion and the dramatic devices, it's like they kind of intertwine, which is very, very nice. But that's my reading. I'm not claiming anything there. Melville also names his characters as biblical figures such as Ahab, Ishmael, and many more. But yeah, apart from, so that's a common feature between the two. But also by naming the poem and the speaker in the poem Lady Lazarus, Plath is foretelling what's about to come, or at least creating expectations, because we know that Lazarus is a guy who comes back from the dead, and that's exactly what Lady Lazarus does, but in a different way, because she's the one that kills herself, and then one that comes back. So she subverts it by putting the word lady, but also in the means in which she comes back from the dead, because she's not Lazarus, she's Lady Lazarus. It's just pretty fun. And unlike Lazarus, Lady Lazarus verbally defies God, her God, at the very climax of the poem, at the moment of resurrection. And her Lucifer is being addressed to in the same line, and they're both put at the same level thanks to the German honorific Herr, which means Mr. And it's also recalling like the Nazi metaphor thing. So she's basically calling God a Nazi, and one of the men she's going to eat in the end. So that's blasphemy there. In Melville, as we've mentioned, he also names his characters, well, some of his characters, with biblical names. And the name Ishmael appears in the very first line, "Call me Ishmael." So he's using the onomastic allusion at the beginning, just as Plath does, maybe not right in the title, but at the very beginning of the novel. And this is actually one of the Shakespearean traits that he would talk about in his article, how he never surprises his readers with a tragic end. So the name of Ishmael is foretelling tragedy, and also the name of Ahab. And it's sort of like in the same manner than Lady Lazarus is foretelling resurrection and death. And Ahab also verbally defies God and his authority throughout the novel, through the use of apostrophe, which Lady Lazarus also does. So that's another parallel, and it's very interesting because here the Shakespearean and the biblical cadences are coming together, and I just love when those kind of things happen.
That's actually really interesting. I had no idea.
Yeah, am I convincing you?
I'm not gonna lie, you kind of are. Like, this is a pretty convincing argument.
Hold on, because I have something else.
There's more? I can't believe that there's more.
Yeah, there is. Not so much more because we had like a word limit, but I have something else.
A treat for me. Tell me, what are you going to tell us about now?
So, going back to theatricality, but this time regarding structural features, Moby Dick has a lot of dramatic chapters in the sense that they're constructed as if they were a play. We have stage directions, we have asides, and we have 13 of them. And the novel has been divided into the 5-act structure of Elizabethan drama, particularly that of revenge tragedy. And this has not been done to Lady Lazarus. Like, no one has publicly divided it into the 5-act structure. But I did, and I suggested a reading, and it fits pretty nicely, I would say. And the rhyme in Lady Lazarus happens to be quite regular, from Act 3 to Act 5. And it's when she burns, when she is ashes, and then when she finally resurrects and decides to warn men that she's going to eat them. So it's very interesting how that fits. And it's just sort of like, it's this poem filled with theatrical devices, and it's sort of like if the poem were begging to have a theatrical structure as well, so I kind of gave it that. And it's a structural parallel with Moby Dick as well. So to sum everything up, all of these features could have been just borrowed from Shakespeare or a fruit of the aesthetic interests of Plath's time, but the fact that there's so much co-occurrence and that the journal entry just frames everything so nicely makes it at least plausible, in my opinion.
Wow, but this has all been really, really so interesting. I feel like personally I'm convinced. I feel like there's a direct connection.
I wouldn't say that it's a direct connection. Rather, I feel like I've prompted the question rather than establishing an answer. So yeah.
Was a very diplomatic answer, Lola. Very, very diplomatic answer. But I want to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing your research with us. It's been wonderful to have you with us today and super, super interesting. So thanks for coming onto the podcast.
Thanks for interviewing me. You've been a great host, and I kind of wish I could do more podcasts because I'm just having so much fun. It's gonna be a nightmare to edit this, but we'll try.
Bye everyone. Thanks so much for listening.